telling you about the story from getting from there to there, and something else as well. So why did I want to tell you this story? I mean, I had my 30th anniversary in testing on May 1st this year, and it gave me the opportunity to reflect. What has happened over the years? How has life changed, both in terms of technology and ways of working, and how has my role changed? In other ways, I wanted to reflect over a recurring question I've had always, and that's the abbreviation. What am I here for? So it all started back in 1986. I was the soldier in the Royal Danish Air Force, working first on radar stations, later in a fighter squadron, supporting the fighters in terms of operational readiness and weapons, and last but not least, in NATO War Headquarters, where I fast became the specialist in their command and control system, for the sole reason that I was the youngest and I wasn't afraid of IT. And that was in 1995. I became a specialist in two command and control systems, Eiffel, which is a German one, and then Nexus, which, by the way, is abbreviation for Northern European Command, Control and Information System. Long abbreviation. By the way, it has two names because it's also called ACBA-CCIS, Allied Command Baltic Approaches, Command, Control and Information System. They like the abbreviations. I was a part of the first site acceptance testing, but there was a little catch with this system. This is the beauty of Nexus. Because when they started the project back in the days, they bought the hardware first. Before they ever started developing, they bought the hardware. So that meant that the minute we got into the site acceptance testing, it was outdated. Look at the beauty. Monochrome screens, it sort of had touch, but then again not, because there was an infrared scan thing around the edges of the monitor, but it was way outdated. It had the huge amount of memory, 256 kilobytes. Shared between 3 workstations. So they fast realized they needed an update and started workshops for moving the entire platform to a Sun Solaris platform without touching any of the ways of working in it, because they didn't want the users needing training. So just porting it from Fortran to Sun Solaris. And that created a really, really not user-friendly system, but more about that later. I was involved in the workshop because my boss, who was a fighter pilot, wasn't into that IT. So he asked me to join and come back and tell him what they said. And eventually I found out that the company was in dire need of a tester. Someone with the knowledge from the business. And I think that's a lot of my generations of testers came into testing that way, from the business. So I sent an application. Could you use someone practical like me? Someone with no IT background, but with a lot of domain knowledge. Actually, in Danish, I said something very specific. I won't translate. In Danish, it would say, en praktisk gris. In English, that means a practical pig. That is not what to put in a job assignment like that. But they hired me anyway. So the first, it was waterfall. Pure waterfall. I mean, this is before the agile manifesto, right? But in the team, we were 9 people handling the entire life cycle from analysis to production. And we were sitting in the same room, and I was sitting in the middle. Nothing happened without me knowing it. And I got involved very early, and we had a lot of fun. That was like the best team I've ever been at. Hadn't got a clue about testing, neither had I, but it was fun. So much fun that we actually this spring had a reunion. And everybody turned up 30 years later. But I needed training. So in 2004, I got my first formal training. I said foundation, I said practitioner, and I went to my very first conference, Eurostar 2004 in Köln. That was mind-blowing. I mean, are there anyone here who's at a conference for the first time? There's a few. Mind-blowing, right? We are so many. I had thought myself as being the only one, I'm the only one in the world doing any testing. And suddenly I was a part of a profession. It was mind-blowing. At the same time, we were on this CMMI journey in the company because being defense, we needed to be a CMMI level at least at 4 because we were dealing with the United States. We ended up on CMMI level 5 in 2005, and by the way, the company is still there. That took a lot of talking because CMMI doesn't really say much about testing. It says something about verification and validation, but that's it. So we got to find our way to put testing in there. But after 17 years, I decided it's time to try something new. And by the way, I give you 3 short intros to my career, and then it becomes way more interesting. I'm not the interesting part here, but just to get the chronology, oh, that's a difficult word, right. So in 2012, I decided I want to be a consultant. I joined Gitte in Denmark, a small startup in Denmark. We were around 50 people at that time. And I had my first meeting with TMAP. Mind-blowing. I'd never heard about it. I knew about this risk-based testing, but I was really missing a practical approach. And suddenly I joined that training, which by the way doesn't exist anymore, and learned about a real hands-on practical approach. Loved it. So I worked there, as I said, until 2020. At the end of 2019, I sort of realized we had merged with Capgemini at that point in Denmark. I'm 1 employee out of 250,000. What difference does it make whether I'm here or not? How do I add value? And that is one of my key values, that I want to make a difference. So my former boss and I decided we wanted to start a new company from scratch. So I resigned at February 12, 2020. Anyone recall what happened around March 1st, 2020? Yeah, that was an interesting time to start a new business. I mean, we were the 2 of us. Luckily, I had my assignment with me, so I was on assignment from the beginning. But we had a very important key thing, and that was our 3 values: professionalism, integrity, and joy. These 3 things are essential for Gitte Quality and for everybody who works there. It's not just values that are on a wall or in a brochure somewhere. It is something that we live every day. We use these values towards ourselves. Am I happy? How do I feel about the integrity of what I do? We use that towards our colleagues. Am I being professional? Is my colleague happy? And we use it towards our customers. So that was the journey, starting from the Air Force, going into IT, becoming a consultant, and then starting all over again. But the thing is, a lot has happened over these 30 years that has nothing to do with me. And that's way more interesting. Because if you look at it, look at technology. Look at the technology from back then to now. I mean, in the first years, we went from the monolith to distributed systems. The rise of the internet. I still remember when we got our 2 first computers in the company in a dedicated area. The internet is up there in that room. You can go to the internet up there. GUI became standard, which was something I longed for, which I will show you in the next slide. And we had the first mobile phones. Not smartphones then, and pretty heavy mobile phones in the beginning as well. And also, we started talking about test automation. Talking about GUI, this is Next CCIS as it evolved. The original, the Unix, and later in late zeros, we actually decided that we had to start all over. Because as I said, that one in the middle, we were told, you are not supposed to change anything in the way the system works. And it wasn't user-friendly whatsoever. So we threw it all away. We started from scratch, involved a user group who came in every month. We had prototyping. We actually built a system that was user-friendly. But there was another thing, as I said. We started discussing automation. in the zeros. How could we do that? What would it affect? And quickly, as a manual tester, the first thought, is this the death of the manual tester? Will I no longer have a job because of automation? And that also meant that in the beginning, we were slightly defensive when it came to that one. Then we go to the 10th. Now we have iOS and Android. We got smartphones. We start talking about cloud computing. Microservices start popping up. And for the test environments and infrastructure, we got suddenly Docker, virtual machines and stuff. Test environments became something that could become much more flexible. And that brings me to the latest. Of course, more cloud. First, we started talking about mobile AI. We talked about observability. And lately, if you haven't discovered it yet, there's something called AI coming. It's the latest I've heard. And the thing with the AI, as we've heard all conference is, when we talk about AI, is that the death of the test profession. And no, it's not. We just gotta learn to adapt. This is an evolution, guys, not a revolution. So we have to evolve with that as well. So with new technology comes new challenges. We're gonna extend our toolbox, not just in terms of tools, but also in terms of way to use these tools. Understand that these can be a help. That also means that we need to adapt, and how we will react when we get new tools in, being testing tools, changing to new platforms, or other things like that. How we react, whether it's a talk to the hand, or it's an embrace, is significantly going to change the way you adapt when new technology appears. Because the main thing when it comes to tools and technology is, it's a journey. You don't just go out, buy a tool, go home, plug it in, and all is good. Apparently, it sometimes feels like that when you hear about new tools in organizations. But if you really want to have the value out of them, you have to do more. Start with why. Simon Sinek is not entirely wrong. We gotta start with figuring out, why do we want that tool in the first place? What value should it add in our company? We gotta figure out who's stakeholders. Who's going to use it? Who's going to maintain it? Who's going to teach people about it? Who's going to know about the status of it? So we got to teach people. All too often, I see companies bringing new systems, new tools into the organization without really considering, how do we introduce these? How do we ensure that they actually use them and we get the value out of them? And tools are expensive. Be sure that you are technically ready before you introduce a new tool, and then ensure that you have a strategy for how to move out. Often tool implementation, big bang, is not the way ahead. Try it out in a small context, make a pilot, figure out what works and doesn't work, and then gradually implement your tools. We have to learn that every time we change something in the daily work of our team, it's not just something that happens with the blink of an eye. And that, of course, brings me to way of working. Because the ways of working within these 30 years have definitely changed as well. When I started, it was waterfall. Maybe a little bit V-model, but mainly just plain old waterfall. And in the early 2000s, we started implementing Scrum and trying to become more agile. Not doing, but being agile. And for testers, that was a big deal. We were a test team. We were 8 testers in that project. We used to sit together. Have you ever done that, sitting a whole group of testers together? It's so fun when you find bugs. You share, most of all, you laugh together, but mostly you learn from the bugs that other people find. If you're challenged with understanding something, you have someone to share And suddenly they told us, from tomorrow off, you will be split out into the 8 development teams. And you will be the only tester in the team. That was another mind-blowing thing, because that takes some getting used to. You're used to having your support team, now you're all alone. And when you heard the talk on conferences, there was a thing, Will that be the death of the test profession? Will agile mean the death of the test profession? Because, the struggle for many teams are real. Many do mechanical agile, as I call it. They know the ceremonies, they know the roles, but they haven't really adapted to them when it comes to practical use. Often, we miss the foundation. Around 60% of all bugs are introduced in requirements or in lack of requirements. But we still see in many agile teams, we do not have a decent foundation to work from. But also, we often, if we are an existing waterfall project moving into agile, we may only have manual testing. And suddenly having to, and we really still have teams that are in that process now. Even though I do know Agile Manifesto was in 2000, we still have teams battling with this. Because how do you squeeze 800 manual test cases into a sprint when you do regression testing? But also the thing that some tend to misinterpret the Scrum Guide a little bit, saying that because it was called a developer team, it's developers only. But the thing is, this is what the Scrum Guide says. The Scrum Guide says that it's important to remember that a developer is not necessarily a software developer. They can focus on any type of product work, whether software or not, and on all aspects of designing, building, testing, or delivering the product. The specific skills that the developers need are often broad and will vary depending on the type of work they do. We need a group of people in a cross-functional team that together as a group have all the capability of analyzing, designing, implementing, testing, integrating, and delivering value. And we see very often that the teams that lose the testing competences, they only have the developers. They might in the end have a UAT where they get some people in from the business. But other than that, we only have the developers. And it's not because, developers are bad testers. Yeah, a little bit. It is a little bit, but at least if they're trying to test their own stuff. But the thing is, if you look at the way we talk about the cross-functional teams, and especially when we are talking about scaling context, we are putting so many different things into the context of the Agile team. So if you don't know these guys, this is Comic Agile, or I actually checked with them yesterday. It's Comic Agile. They are having a hang over. Comic Agile, as I'll continue to call them, has a long list of great cartoons showing patterns and anti-patterns in Agile. And this is one of my favorite. Team, you may also own our integration platform, Cloud Strategy, and Clean Code Initiative. And we expect you to master origami with your eyes closed. Sometimes I do think that is how the cross-functional teams feel. Because originally, when we started talking about Agile, started talking about Scrum, we talked about T-shaped profiles, you remember? One deep, and then some less deep competences. Then someone introduced the pie shapes, and no, not the cake. Pi as in the mathematical symbol. So now we have 2 deep competences and some broad. Then came the M-shaped, 3 deep. The latest I've heard is the comb-shaped, so a comb. And I can only hope that the comb they use is not the one they use for Scandinavian hair, because that has very, very, very many teeth, and they are very, very, very short. What do I mean with that? The more teeth you have on your comb, the less competence, the less deep are your competence. So if we continue this journey of pressing everything down onto the development team, that everybody has to be able to do everything, we will go from having a team of people who are really, really good specialists to people who are jack of all trades. And if you need to cover all roles in one person and all specialties and all handling the CI/CD pipeline and whatnot, we become jack of all trades. And then our quality will dive down. Then came SAFe and LESS and Scrum at Scale and Spotify, not model, Spotify, beep, 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 beep. We were starting to scale agile. The challenge with that, there's a whole presentation in the challenging with this, but one of the challenges, especially with the SAFe part, was that a lot of companies did this jump. So they went directly from waterfall to this simple picture, without starting with an agile foundation, without the understanding that every member of an agile release train must understand the agile values and principles. It's not enough that we can say the 4 lines of the agile manifesto, individuals and interactions over process and tools, We need to understand and live by those 12 principles that lie beneath the values. If you go directly from waterfall and you have to figure out what your role is in this is a huge jump. And that is, I think, one of the reasons why we are challenged so much with the SAFe implementations, plus a lot of other things that are not inside the context of this presentation. But what was funny when we started talking about SAFe was that the word about SAFe was, now it's the death of the test manager role. And we did see a lot of companies firing their test manager because in the little drawing, there is no test manager. I did the SAFe SPC training, and that was one of my first questions. Where did the test manager go? Who is going to coordinate the end-to-end quality of all these teams that are now autonomous? And the answer was, maybe the system architect is not necessarily one role, it can be several. So there can be a test architect hiding somewhere behind him. They just forgot to tell it when they implemented the framework. When you look at some of the numbers from World Quality Report and from Forrester's Definitive Quality Survey, these numbers are from 2020. My guess is they don't look much better today. 98% have challenges with testing in SAFe. More than half have challenges with their test environment and with their test data. Testing is not simple in SAFe. 50% do not have tests at a desired level, and 43% lacks professional test expertise. Most of the trains I have seen haven't had any testers on team level whatsoever, which is not a good thing. But also the fact that only 23% covers business risk sufficiently with their testing. These numbers I do not like. This is one of my biggest concerns when it comes to SAFe. Yes, there's a lot of overhead and there's a lot of governance and a lot of stuff, but my biggest fear is that we believe that you can take 6 to maybe 15 different agile teams, say they are all autonomous, put them in the same agile release train and wanting them to deliver value and end-to-end quality without having a test manager, or an orchestrator, or whatever you wish to call them, someone with the end-to-end quality perspective. The thing is, with new ways of working in general, we get new challenges. Funny enough, we need to extend our toolbox. With agile, we got to get used to acceptance criteria and invest. We got to get used to behavior-driven development, acceptance test-driven development. There were many new ways of working. That means we need to extend our testing toolbox. Exploratory testing gets more important than ever. And how we react to the change will significantly affect our success in our roles in the new world. We can choose to say, no, I don't want to. Or we can choose to say, I embrace this change and I gotta figure out what is my role in it. How can I adapt and how can I help that world to adapt so that we find a good solution? And again, with anything, you see there's a sort of a red thread here in the presentation. It is a journey. Have any of you tried the situation where they sit and they have a huge consultancy company coming in and they sit down behind closed doors and they make a whole heap of PowerPoints telling you how to do scaled agile? They present it to you. They give you 2 days to the entire company. They give you 2 to 3 days of training and then they leave. Go implement. That is not the way to change ways of working. Changing ways of working means a culture change. It means that we don't only need to transform, we need to transition. We need to understand both as individuals and as teams and as train, what does this do for me? Where do I fit in? How can I add value? That brings me to the last part, my role and the profession. So over the years, I've had a lot of roles or titles. I started as a customer support, not because I was doing customer support, because there was no title containing anything with testing in the company. So they gave me something that existed, but I was a tester. It actually had to go through 3 takes before I got a title with testing in it. So I had many different roles, and maybe quality engineering is the next one, not necessarily the last one, I don't know. But I have always looked at my role as how do I add value? How can I support my team, my project, my train? And things changed in the profession as well. I mean, around 2005-10, we started talking, at least in our company, about outsourcing. Outsourcing both development, but most importantly for us, testing work. And as soon as that dialogue started, the fear came. This is going to be the death of the test profession in Denmark. But I'm still here. We are still here. Again, we had to adapt and find out how do we fit in the context of outsourcing. And the main thing here is that we need to improve, we need to learn. When I entered the door with my very first job in testing, I told them, the day that I go home and feel that I haven't learned anything new will be the day that I quit. It took 17 years. But I have always had the mindset that I need to continuously learn. I'm a little more than 29 years old now. Spoilers, I don't care, I'm 58. But I'm still learning. I just became a coach, did coach training. I'm gonna dive into the whole AI thing. I have done some, and now with the new TMAP book, I have a new book to read, and I have to figure it out. So I've been learning all my life. These are just, this is not recommendation that this is a list of courses you need to take. These are just my courses. That is the training I have done. From ICEP Foundation to ISTQB expert level test management, from master coaching to facilitation to project management. I even was trained as a Unix system administrator. I actually do pretty good on the command line in a Unix platform. Or at least I did. It has been a couple of years since then. But at any time when something happens, being a new way of working, being new technology, I always stop, or just being a new role, I always stop and think, so how can I best possibly prepare myself for that new role? What can I do to add value? So I learn from many different places. I go to trainings. I use e-learning, read books. I love books. And for some odd reason, prefer the physical ones. I look at the web, reading blog posts, articles, go on YouTube. That is sometimes a little bit difficult because that's really a jungle out there. But most of all, I take part in networks, going to seminars, meeting peers, discussing our craft. And I go on conferences. One part of conferences is doing what you're doing right now, not necessarily listening to me, but listening to someone who's doing a presentation, who has a story to tell. But I would almost say even more important is the talk you have amongst each other. What are the experiences that you have? And by the way, if I could give you a recommendation, find the story that you want to tell and send in your first abstract for a conference. Because that is a splendid way to learn. Because if you want to stand on the stage, you want to be able to answer any question. So take that first step and share your story, because that's also a way we learn. You learn as a presenter, and everybody else in the room will learn. So whenever you want to consider yourself and not just ways of working, whenever you want to change, it's just like any other journey. If you think about the GPS, if you want to use a GPS, it needs two things. It needs to know where you are right now, and it needs to know where you want to go. And that's the same with personal development. No matter whether what you want to learn is something technical, something like new test design techniques, if you want to learn about coaching and facilitation, it doesn't really matter. You need to figure out, where am I going next, and what do I need to get there? Stay curious. Stay open to learning. Use any opportunity to learn. Also from areas where you think, but that's not testing. Because there is a lot to learn. Participate, as I say, send in an abstract for a conference. Figure out if there's a network close by, go some kind of meetups. If not, start one. One thing is, it's really good to have communities of practice in your own company. But it's actually even better to have them across companies, because that's where we truly learn from each other, because that's where we do things differently. Collaborate. Support others. If you are an experienced tester, test manager, test automation specialist, whatever, experienced something, if someone new and junior comes into the company, help them. Become their mentor. Some of the things I've learned most of over the years is the fact that I have a couple of mentees. Not because I then get an opportunity to brag about all my 30 years of experience, but because they give me the weirdest questions. And that I find really a lot of joy in having to answer no matter what they come in with. And if I don't know it, I'll just say it. I don't know, but I'll figure it out. Take responsibility for your own growth, but also take responsibility of your well-being, your mental well-being. If we want to move forward, and if we want to succeed and enjoy being in our craft and in our profession, we got to feel that we are in the right place. And as soon as you feel that you're not that anymore, you got to let your feet walk and find a place where your well-being will be in focus. So, battles won, battles lost. As I said, looking back, some battles were won, some battles were lost, but honestly, most of them are ongoing. I've been in this business now for 30 years, and I still have to explain why we need to test. I had to back then on the North Data mainframe. I have to do it today, working with cloud and microservices. That hasn't changed. But the value we have doesn't lie in our certification but I do like them, honestly. I like to learn. But the thing is, our value is in our curiosity, in our critical thinking, our asking questions. So, keep our craft alive. Stay engaged, share your experience, and never stop learning. I mean, we gotta not end like that. We are not supposed to end like dinosaurs being extinct. I hope that is what you can get from all my red text during this presentation. We have talked about the death of the profession so many times over the last 30 years, but we're still here. So I asked ChatGPT, I need another animal to visualize that we need to adapt, we need to learn, we need to change in order to always fit in. To be honest, I am not too happy about the answer. Because the cockroach is the animal known as the most adaptive animal at all. So let's not go there. I see us more like an octopus. Or, what is the name of the lizard that changes colors? What? Yeah, chameleon, yes. That is, we need to constantly adapt to find a way to fit in. To find a way, more importantly, to make a difference every day and add value in our context. Thank you very much.
All good?
Yes,
okay.
All good.
I've been looking at the questions, and I don't know how to say this, but I feel so much respect towards you through the questions. It's really nice. It's really nice. First of all, congratulations on this huge milestone. Big applause. What do you think? The question is here, thank you. How do you avoid burnout?
Quick answer, I don't. In 2014, I went down with stress due to too many context shifts and having a feeling that I could not add the value that I wanted to. I knew already from the beginning I would not be in success in what I was doing, so I went down. But I got a lot of help from my coach, and I got up again. And now I have a tell, and now I know I get a signal from my body as soon as it turns up. And you might have noticed that I'm coughing. I actually have holes in my pocket here. That's because one of my tells when I get stressed is that I cough. I'm having no cold. So I did get a burnout. But I got up again, and what I did was using a lot of time in figuring out a really good exercise was, what are my values? What are your values? Can you seriously sit down and say, these are my top three values? Mine are mastery, integrity, and joy. And it took me a while to find those three. Consider, what are your values?
I don't know what my values are. Wow. Okay.
Exercise for you tonight.
It will be, thank you. No, honestly. Okay, what were your greatest QA challenges in your career?
I think some of the greatest challenges have been being a test manager or program test manager in large programs and projects in new domains that I didn't know, and where I was the only one in the program having a title containing anything related to test. So I had to be a program test manager, but also facilitate workshops with the teams figuring out what are the business processes that we are going to cover, introducing them to process cycle test, my favorite test design technique. So I had to be both keeping the big overview, being strategic, talking to the stakeholders, but I also had to be a test designer. That, I think, has been the one thing, and another one has been where I have felt from the start that I was talking to someone like this, who did not want us to test.
Thank you. If exploratory testing and critical thinking is becoming more important, why is it not present at conferences and trainings? Wow.
I think there are some pretty good training in exploratory testing, and since I do not, I haven't got it, but there's rapid software testing, there's BBST, there are people doing tailored training in exploratory testing. But I think one of the reasons why we don't talk too much about exploratory testing, I think it's become some tend to take it for granted. Plus, we in later years have become very focused on technology and, the two-letter abbreviation, AI thingy. And that sort of moves some of the basic things. But that's not only exploratory testing. The same goes for some of our foundation test design techniques. And they are the foundation of our craft.
Okay, big battle between the questions. What would you say, what would you recommend to those who battle with imposter syndrome?
I was just looking because I have a good idea about where that question came from.
Okay.
Believe it or not, so do I. I always question whether I'm good enough. I think, for my sake, it's a bit also gender, and the part of Denmark that I'm coming from, we are taught not to be too much. So I don't really know how to do it. What I've done is I have put myself out there, taking chances. From the minute I did my first presentation, I decided that I would only do presentations that covered my experiences, because no one can question my experiences. If I'm standing up here and presenting a theory, you could question my understanding of a theory, but you cannot question what I have experienced. So that was how I sort of made myself feel safe in that context. Other than that is mainly I keep learning so that I feel that I am on top of the craft of the profession that I represent. That is the best I can do.
I already see I'm going to be sad when we finish off. Okay, which is your favorite certification program for testers?
My favorite is, I can't say one, I have to say two. Because I am both ISTQB and TMAP. And I'm both a trainer and one on the other. And TMAP, a lot of the TMAP is actually inside ISTQB if you look at the references of the different syllabi. I have learned a lot when I started diving into TMAP about product risk analysis and how to do really a practical approach to test strategy based on that. But I also learned a lot from doing my expert level test management, because it took my test management to a new level. And I love teaching ISTQB Foundation to new testers. So the answer is both.
Amazing. Okay, maybe the last question. When you started your first testing job, were there any training materials or test approaches provided for you, or did you have to learn on the job?
I actually learned on the job, and I'm trying to look if I can see him, because I bought my very first book back then, and it was called Risk-Based E-Business Testing. And the author of that book is in the room somewhere. But that was the very first book I have, and other than that, I didn't get any. Oh, there you are. That's Paul Gerard. He was the author of the book. Other than that, I didn't get anything. That was trial and error.
Okay. I think I could keep you here for hours and hours. You were amazing. I have the same shoes, and you look wonderful, and you're amazing. Huge applause, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Gitte Ottosen, thank you so much for everything.